Station Meridian floated in the dark space between stars, a massive structure built by the combined efforts of 100 different species. It was a place of science, diplomacy, and discovery. Inside its white walls and bright corridors, the most important research in the galaxy took place. Today would be no different, except that today would change everything. Dr. Haiwan walked through the station's main laboratory corridor, her tablet glowing softly in her hands. She had worked in space research for 15 years, studying the biology of alien species and comparing their genetics to understand how life evolved across the galaxy. She was good at her job, careful and precise, and she never made mistakes in her analysis. Her partner, Dr. Min Su, followed behind her, carrying equipment for their important test. The Galactic Council had asked them to do something unusual. They wanted to compare the DNA of the Vorntai, the most powerful warrior species in all of known space, with the DNA of other younger races. The Vorntai were proud and strong. They had ruled the galaxy for 300 years. Their military was unmatched. Their genetics were considered to be perfect, designed through thousands of years of careful selection and improvement. Humanity was included in the test, but nobody expected humans to be important. The human race had only been traveling through space for about 200 years. Humans came from a small planet called Earth, far away from the centers of galactic power. Most alien species saw humans as interesting but not particularly special. They were not as physically strong as the Vorntai. They were not as intelligent as the Zarathi. They were not as long-lived as the ancient Kepler race. Humans were young, messy, and unpredictable. They were included in the test mostly because it was fair to include everyone. Dr. Haiwan did not expect anything surprising from the human genetic material. She was wrong. The laboratory was a clean, white room filled with machines that could read DNA, analyze proteins, and process genetic information faster than any biological mind could. The equipment hummed softly, waiting for the samples to be placed inside. Haiwan had done this work hundreds of times before. The process was simple and normal. She carefully placed the DNA samples into the machine. First came the Vorntai sample, glowing slightly in its container. The machine began to work, reading the genetic code, separating the base pairs, analyzing the structure. Numbers and patterns appeared on the large holographic screen in the center of the room. The Vorntai DNA showed exactly what Haiwan expected to see. The genetic markers for strength were very high. The markers for tactical thinking were advanced. The markers for survival and aggression were strong but controlled. The Vorntai were, as everyone believed, genetically perfect warriors. Then came the human sample. Min Su monitored the analysis from his position at the computer terminal. His job was to watch the numbers, to make sure everything was working correctly, and to alert Haiwan if anything seemed wrong. The human DNA began to process through the machine. At first, nothing unusual appeared. Humans showed normal markers for intelligence, creativity, and social bonding. These results matched what the scientists expected. But then something strange happened. The numbers on the screen began to change. New data appeared, showing genetic markers that Min Su had never seen at such high levels in any species. He leaned forward, his eyes widening. He stared at the numbers, then looked at his colleague. "That is not right," he said quietly. "Check this data again. Something is wrong with the machine." Haiwan moved to the screen. She studied the numbers carefully, her trained mind processing what she was seeing. The machine was working correctly. The problem was not with the equipment. The problem was with the data itself. The human DNA contained genetic markers for aggression, for competitive drive, for the ability to think about violence and strategy. These markers were not just high. They were much higher than the Vorntai. They were almost 3 times as high. "This is impossible," Haiwan whispered. Her hands began to shake slightly as she touched the holographic display. She looked at Min Su, and they shared a moment of complete understanding. They had just discovered something that could change how the galaxy understood the human species forever. Neither of them knew what to do. The laboratory fell silent except for the soft humming of the machines. HFY double-checked the analysis. Then she checked it again. The numbers did not change. The human genome contained 3 times the hostile genetic sequences of the Vorntay. Humans, the young species that nobody had thought was particularly important, carried in their DNA the markers of apex predators. They carried the genetic code of warriors, written into every cell of their bodies. In the observation room above the laboratory, a figure watched through the transparent wall. This was Commander Vossatak, the Vorntay observer sent by his people to monitor the genetic test. He had scales the color of crimson fire, and his eyes were golden and sharp. He had lived for 200 years and had fought in 7 wars. He understood power and strength better than almost any being alive. He had been watching the test with professional interest, expecting it to confirm what everyone already knew about his species' superiority. When he saw the numbers on the screen, his body went completely still. Vossatak understood exactly what those numbers meant. He had studied genetics in military academy. He knew the markers for aggression. He knew what triple the hostile sequences meant. It meant that humans were, from a genetic standpoint, more naturally suited for violence than his own people. It meant that the Vorntay, for all their pride and strength and 300 years of dominance, had been wrong about something fundamental. It meant the galaxy would never be the same. HFY finally spoke, breaking the heavy silence. "We need to run this test again, with new samples, from different human populations. We need to verify this before we tell anyone." Minsu nodded. He understood the importance of careful science, but he also understood that they had just discovered something huge, something that would shake the foundation of galactic power structures. Every moment they waited was a moment before the truth became public knowledge, and once it did, nobody would be able to stop what came next. The 2 scientists began their work again, running the tests multiple times, using different equipment, checking their procedures. And every single time, the results were exactly the same. Humans had triple the hostile genetic sequences of the Vorntay. It was not a mistake. It was not equipment failure. It was real. As the night shifted into morning aboard Station Meridian, Dr. HFY and Dr. Minsu knew that they held in their hands a secret that would change everything. They knew, without being told, that they could not keep this discovery quiet. The moment they reported their findings to the Galactic Council, the delicate balance of power in the entire galaxy would begin to shift. The question was no longer whether humans were important. The question was what the galaxy would do with this new knowledge, and what it would mean for the future of humanity among the stars. The news did not stay secret. Within 3 days, the Galactic Council demanded answers. Within a week, 3 independent laboratories on different planets had repeated the genetic analysis. Each one produced the same shocking result. Humans carried genetic markers for aggression and hostility that were 3 times higher than the Vorntay. There was no error. There was no mistake. The truth was confirmed, and now the entire galaxy knew it. The reaction was immediate and complicated. Some species were shocked. Others were frightened. A few seemed to understand something that others missed. But everyone had opinions, and everyone wanted to know what this meant. Captain Jiwoo received the classified briefing in a secure room deep beneath the surface of Luna, Earth's moon. She had spent 20 years protecting human colonies and human ships from pirates and invaders. She was strong, intelligent, and experienced in combat. She had always thought of herself as a protector, someone who used force only when necessary. Now she was being told that her entire species carried genetic markers for something called hostile sequences that were 3 times higher than the galaxy's most famous warrior race. Admiral Kwan sat across from her in the dark room. He was older than Jiwoo, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been in the military for 40 years, and he had seen many dangerous situations. But even he seemed troubled by what he had to explain. "The Galactic Council is concerned," Admiral Kwan said slowly. "The genetic data is real. Multiple tests confirm it. Humans are not physically stronger than the Vorntai, but we are genetically predisposed to aggression in ways they never are. This makes some species very nervous." Jiwoo listened carefully. She did not speak. She did not interrupt. She simply listened to her superior officer explain how the genetic discovery was changing how other species thought about humanity. "There is talk of isolation," Admiral Kwan continued. "Some want to prevent human expansion into deeper space until we can be properly controlled and studied. Others think we should be treated as a threat. A few suggest we should be contained or even eliminated before we become dangerous." Jiwoo felt something cold in her chest. She was being told that her species might be seen as a danger simply because of what their DNA showed. She was being told that humanity might be quarantined, restricted, or attacked because scientists had found genetic markers in human cells. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "Right now, nothing," Admiral Kwan replied. "But prepare the defense forces. We may need to show that we are serious about protecting human space. Fear and uncertainty are dangerous. We need to remain strong." Across the galaxy, on the Vorntai homeworld called Kroneth, a very different conversation was happening. The warrior caste had ruled Vorntai society for 10,000 years. They had been bred for strength, selected for dominance, genetically engineered for perfection. Their entire culture was built on the belief that they were the best warriors in the galaxy, that their genes were superior, that their way was the right way. The genetic discovery shattered this belief. Scholar Nuri Seth worked in the Institute of Advanced Biology in the capital city of Kroneth. She was different from most Vorntai. Her scales were dusky purple instead of the crimson of warriors. She was smaller and less muscular. She was a scientist, not a soldier. She had studied genetics her whole life, and she understood the implications of the human DNA test better than most of her people. She sat in a conference room with other Vorntai scientists, listening as they argued about what the data meant. Some insisted there was a mistake. Others wanted to repeat the tests with different equipment. A few seemed almost paralyzed by the implications. "This changes nothing," said researcher Talvek, a large male with scarred skin. "Humans have never fought a war in space. They have no military experience. Yes, their genetics show potential for aggression, but they have not developed it. We are still superior." "Are we?" Noriseth asked quietly. "Or have we simply been lucky that they have not needed to develop that potential? Their genetics show that they could. That is different from being stronger than them." The argument continued, but Noriseth was already thinking about something else. She was thinking that understanding the truth was more important than protecting pride. She was thinking that maybe, just maybe, she should try to talk to the human scientists directly. Perhaps together they could understand what this discovery really meant. She requested permission to travel to Station Meridian. The request was unusual and caused much debate, but eventually permission was granted. A few days later, Noriseth boarded a spacecraft and began the journey across space toward the research station where this entire discovery had begun. When she arrived at Station Meridian, Dr. Haywan was waiting to greet her in a diplomatic room. The two scientists faced each other for the first time. One was human, one was Vorntai. One carried the genetic markers of a warrior race that had ruled for 300 years. One carried the genetic markers of a species that had ruled for only 200 years through space. But both carried something more important than genetics. Both carried scientific curiosity and a desire to understand truth. "Your species did not know," Noriseth said when they sat down to talk. Her translator converted her words into Korean, the language HFY spoke. The Vornte's voice was calm and measured, without anger or fear. You did not know what you carried in your DNA. Your species has not embraced what you truly are yet. HFY met her golden eyes steadily. She did not look away. She did not show fear, even though she was speaking with a member of the species that the entire galaxy feared. And the Vorntai have built everything on who you thought you were, HFY replied. You believed you were the perfect warriors. You believed you were genetically superior. This discovery challenges that belief. That is why you are here. That is why you wanted to talk to me. Yes, Nuriseth said simply, because I want to understand, and I think you want to understand too. Together, we might discover something important, something that goes beyond fear or pride. The two scientists began to talk, not as representatives of their species, but as researchers seeking truth. And as they talked, something important began to happen. They began to understand that genetics was only part of the story. They began to see that what mattered was not what you were born with, but what you chose to do with it. And that conversation would change the course of their meeting and everything that came after it. Dr. HFY spent 3 weeks studying human history in ways she had never done before. She accessed ancient records from Earth, studied old books and documents, and read accounts written by humans thousands of years before space travel. She worked late into the night, her eyes tired but her mind focused on understanding a single question. Where had these genetic markers come from? Why did humans carry within their DNA the markers of such extreme aggression? The answer, she found, was disturbing and fascinating at the same time. Human prehistory was a story of constant violence. HFY read about early humans hunting animals far larger and more powerful than themselves. She read about tribal wars that lasted generations, about conflicts over resources, about humans fighting against each other across continents and through ages. She read about the development of weapons, from simple stones to bronze and iron, and eventually to machines that could destroy cities. Every major human invention seemed to have been created, at least partly, as a way to kill other humans more effectively, or to survive being killed by other humans. Unlike the Vorntai, whose warrior genetics had been deliberately designed in laboratories by their scientists and leaders, humans had evolved their hostile genetic markers naturally. Natural selection had favored the humans who were more aggressive, more strategic, more willing to use violence to solve problems. Over millions of years, evolution had refined these traits until humans became something unique. A species that had survived not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the smartest about using violence as a tool. But there was more to the story. Humans had also evolved to cooperate, to work together, to build complex societies. The very aggression that made them dangerous also made them capable of organizing in large groups. The same instinct that made them hunt other species also made them able to work as teams, with clear leaders and followers. The violence in human genes came paired with the capacity for loyalty, teamwork, and shared purpose. HFY shared her findings with Dr. Minsu one evening in his small quarters on the station. She brought the historical data she had gathered, showing the ancient records of human conflict and the tools humans had invented to wage war. "Look at this," she said, showing him a timeline of human technology. Every major advance seems connected to making war more efficient. Metallurgy developed because they needed better weapons. Chemistry developed because they needed explosives. Even mathematics advanced partly because they needed to calculate battle strategies. Minsu studied the information carefully. He saw the same pattern HFY had seen. But he also saw something else. "Look at what else they created," he said, pointing to other items on the timeline. "Music, art, literature, philosophy, medicine, agriculture, architecture. They created things of incredible beauty alongside things of incredible violence. It is as though two different forces have always fought inside the human mind, the force to destroy and the force to create. Exactly, Haywan said. The genetic markers for hostility and aggression are real, but they are not the whole story. Humans are not simple creatures designed for a single purpose. We are contradictory. We are chaos and order, violence and compassion, all mixed together in one species. The news of Haywan's research spread through the scientific community across the galaxy. Other researchers began looking at their own data about human development. They confirmed what Haywan had found. Humans had evolved their genetic markers through millions of years of natural competition and survival, not through deliberate genetic engineering like the Vorntai or other advanced species. Agent Do-hyun, a human intelligence officer working for the Unified Earth government, prepared a presentation for the Galactic Council. He was tasked with explaining what the research meant and what it suggested about human nature and human potential. He stood before representatives of 100 different species, a small human among giants and beings of impossible shapes and powers. What we see in the genetic data, Do-hyun explained, his voice calm and professional, is not something new about humans. It is something old, very old. Our ancestors were competitors. They hunted. They fought. They survived because they were better at using intelligence as a weapon than any other species was. Over millions of years, our DNA learned these lessons. Our genetics are not designed. They are earned. They are written in our cells because our ancestors survived the hardest test that evolution can give. He showed images of human history, of wars and conflicts, and the weapons that humans had invented. But he also showed images of human achievements, art, music, medicine, cities, monuments, and dreams. Yes, humans carry the genetic markers of warriors, Do-hyun continued. But we also carry the markers of artists, healers, builders, and philosophers. The question about human genetics is not whether humans can be dangerous. The question is whether humans will choose to be dangerous. And the answer to that question does not lie in our DNA. It lies in our choices. Commander Vostok, the Vorntai officer who had watched the original genetic test, listened to this presentation with great interest. When Do-hyun finished speaking, Vostok asked a question that had been in his mind since the test results had first appeared. If humans possess such genetic markers for aggression and hostility, Vostok asked, why have they not conquered the galaxy? Why have they not used their warlike nature to expand their power and dominate their neighbors? Do-hyun considered the question carefully before he answered. He was aware that the Vorntai commander was asking this not out of idle curiosity, but out of genuine confusion. The Vorntai could not understand a species with warrior genetics that chose not to wage constant war. Perhaps, Do-hyun said, because humans are not one-dimensional creatures designed for a single purpose. Perhaps because we have learned that strength is not just about force. Perhaps because we understand that cooperation is more powerful than domination. Or perhaps simply because we have only recently left our world and entered the galaxy. We have not had time to do what the Vorntai have done. And maybe, when we have the time, we will choose to do things differently. The presentation ended, but the questions remained. Across the galaxy, different species began to understand that they had been wrong about humans. Humans were not weak or unimportant. Humans were young predators, still learning who they were and what they could become. And that uncertainty, that question about what humans would eventually choose to do with their potential, frightened some species and intrigued others. The galaxy had entered a new age, and humanity was no longer a minor player in it. For better or worse, the young species from Earth had become central to everyone's plans for the future. The secret of human genetic markers did not stay contained for long. Within 2 weeks of Do-hyun's presentation to the Galactic Council, The information had spread to every civilization in known space. News networks across 1,000 different worlds broadcast the story. Scientists debated the findings. Religious leaders offered different interpretations of what it meant. Politicians planned strategies for how their nations should respond to this new reality about humanity. Some species formed military alliances, fearing that humans might one day use their genetic potential to expand their power. Others approached humanity with new respect, even caution. They began to wonder if they should negotiate with humans differently now that they understood what humans were capable of. A few species simply decided that humans had always been dangerous and that now they had scientific proof. Religious organizations across the galaxy struggled with the discovery in their own ways. The believers of the Eternal Order declared that human genetic markers were proof that humans had been chosen by the divine for a special purpose. The followers of the Path of Balance saw the human genetic markers as evidence of cosmic imbalance that needed correction. The Church of Universal Harmony issued a statement calling for peace and understanding despite the new knowledge. The political response was more organized and more frightening. A group of older species, those who had been traveling through space for thousands of years, began to meet in private. They called themselves the Quarantine Coalition. Their goal was simple. Humanity should be prevented from expanding into the deeper regions of space until humans could be proven safe and properly controlled. They argued that leaving an unpredictable species with extreme genetic predispositions for violence free to roam the galaxy was dangerous. They said humans needed to be studied, monitored, and limited. The Quarantine Coalition included some powerful nations. They began to move military ships to positions that would block human expansion. They began to gather support from other species. They began to prepare regulations that would prevent human ships from traveling beyond certain boundaries in space. The message was clear. Humanity was now seen as a potential threat, and the galaxy's older powers wanted to make sure that humans could not become too powerful too quickly. News of these developments reached the United Earth government within days. Leaders met in emergency sessions. Military commanders prepared defensive strategies. Scientists worked on ways to show that humans were not dangerous. But underneath all of this activity, many humans felt a new emotion: fear. They were afraid that the genetic discovery would destroy their chances of becoming true members of galactic civilization. They were afraid that they would be treated as enemies because of what their DNA showed. The human response was complicated. Some humans saw the genetic markers as a source of pride. They believed that humans were naturally superior warriors and should embrace this identity. Others saw it as a burden or even a curse. They wanted to show that humans were more than just their genetics, that humans were peaceful and civilized and should not be judged by their DNA. Dr. Minsu found himself spending less time in the laboratory and more time in emotional conversations with his wife, Lena. She was an artist, one of the most celebrated human artists, working in space. She had created beautiful sculptures that were displayed in galleries across the galaxy. Now she struggled to understand what the genetic discovery meant. One evening, Lena brought tea to Minsu's private quarters and sat beside him as he stared at data on his computer screen. The numbers and patterns glowed in the dark room. Lena asked the question that many humans were asking. "Do you think it means we are inherently more violent?" she asked quietly. "Do you think that because of our genes, we are destined to become conquerors and warlords?" Minsu put down his work and thought about the question carefully. He had spent his entire life studying biology and genetics. He understood the science better than most humans did. But he also understood that science did not tell the whole story. "It means we are capable of greater violence," he said slowly. "The genetic markers show that humans have the capacity, the instinct, the predisposition toward aggression. But capability is not destiny. Humans also created music, philosophy, literature. We built empires, yes, but we also built hospitals and schools and centers of learning. We are not one thing. We are many things. Then what changes? Lena asked. If we have these genetic markers anyway, and we have been developing these markers naturally for millions of years, then how is this discovery different? Why is everyone so afraid now when nothing about us has actually changed? Minsu smiled slightly. His wife had asked the most important question of all. Nothing about us has changed biologically, he agreed. But everything has changed in how the galaxy understands us. Before this discovery, other species ignored humans. They thought we were young and weak and not particularly important. Now they know that we carry genetic potential that rivals their greatest warriors. That knowledge changes how they think about us. It changes how they negotiate with us. It changes how they fear us. And most importantly, it changes how we see ourselves. In other parts of the galaxy, other conversations were happening. On the Vornte world of Kroneth, military leaders gathered to discuss strategy. They had lost their confidence that they were the most powerful warriors in the galaxy. They had lost the certainty that their genetic design was superior. This loss of certainty was more dangerous than any military threat. A species that lost its confidence could become either very aggressive or very defensive. Scholar Nuriseth worked with human scientists to prepare a joint statement for the Galactic Council. She wanted to show that understanding did not have to lead to conflict. She wanted to show that the Vornte and humans could work together despite the genetic discovery, but she knew that her own people were divided. Some Vornte wanted to accept the reality that other species had genetic potential equal to or greater than their own. Others wanted to deny it or find ways to prove that the data was wrong. Captain Ji Woo prepared the human defense forces for possible conflict. She did not want war, but she knew that the Quarantine Coalition was serious about their plans to restrict human expansion. She trained her soldiers, prepared her ships, and made plans for how humanity could defend itself if needed. She also knew that military strength alone would not solve this problem. What humanity needed was to show the galaxy that humans deserved to be treated as equals, not as threats to be contained. The galaxy moved slowly toward a crisis point. The Quarantine Coalition grew stronger each week, gathering more species to their cause. The fear about human genetics spread through news networks and political gatherings, but at the same time, other voices began to speak up. Scientists argued against fear. Some species reached out to humans in friendship. Others began to question whether the Quarantine Coalition's plans were wise or just. Humanity stood at a crossroads. The genetic discovery had changed everything, but what came next would depend on choices that humans and other species would make together. The question was not what humans were capable of. The question was what the galaxy would do with the knowledge that humans were capable of so much. The Vornte made an offer that surprised everyone in the galaxy. Instead of joining the Quarantine Coalition or attacking humanity, the Vornte government announced that they wanted to hold a series of official competitions between Vornte warriors and human soldiers. The competitions would not be fights to the death. They would be controlled tests designed to measure different types of skill and ability. Scientists would judge the results. The galaxy would watch and learn. On the surface, this seemed like a reasonable way to settle the question of whether humans were truly comparable to the Vornte. But everyone understood that there was more to it than that. The Vornte were facing a crisis of identity and confidence. They needed to prove to themselves that they were still superior, still worthy of the respect they had always received. If they lost too many competitions against humans, it would confirm that their genetic engineering had failed to create the perfect warriors they believed they had created. For humans, this was an opportunity and a risk. If humans won, they would gain respect and prove that their genetic potential was real and useful. But if humans lost, it would seem to confirm that the genetic markers were dangerous and that humans could not be trusted with freedom to expand through space. The competitions would be watched by billions of beings across the galaxy. The results would shape the future of human-alien relations for generations to come. Captain Ji Woo volunteered to lead the human team. She asked for the best soldiers and warriors humanity had to offer. The first person she recruited was Sung Ho, a man from the Asian Defense Council who was known as one of the greatest military strategists alive. Sung Ho could think 10 steps ahead of his opponents. He could see connections that other people missed. He had a gift for finding victory in situations that seemed impossible. The second person Ji Woo recruited was Min Ah, a woman who had spent 15 years studying different fighting styles from different human cultures. She was flexible, creative, and brilliant at adapting to unexpected situations. She could learn new techniques in days that took other people months to master. She was physically strong, but mentally even stronger. The third member of the team was Han Buell, an expert in weapon technology and engineering. She knew how to use machines and tools in creative ways. She could build things, fix things, and invent things that nobody had thought of before. She represented the human capacity for innovation and problem-solving. The fourth member was Jae Sung, a man who had served in the human Navy for 20 years. He had fought in several conflicts and had survived situations where many other soldiers had died. He understood how to survive, how to cooperate with a team, and how to stay calm under extreme pressure. The fifth member was Nari, a young woman who had unusual skill in reading other people and understanding their emotions and motivations. She was a negotiator and strategist who understood that winning sometimes meant understanding your opponent's psychology better than your opponent understood it themselves. These 5 humans traveled to a neutral space station called Arena 3, designed specifically for the competitions. They met the Vornte team for the first time in the arrival hall. The Vornte warriors were massive, with scales that glowed in the bright light of the station. They moved with the confidence of beings who had trained their entire lives for combat. Their leader was a warrior named Krell Vor, with scars across his face from dozens of past battles. The first competition was a test of physical strength and endurance. The Vornte dominated this competition. Their genetic modifications gave them superior muscle density and cardiovascular systems. They were faster, stronger, and more powerful than the human competitors. The humans came in second, which was not surprising, but still disappointing. Many people in the watching galaxy saw this result and thought that the Vornte would win most of the competitions. But the second competition was very different. This was a tactical simulation, a complex game where 2 commanders had to manage resources, plan strategy, and make decisions that would lead to victory or defeat. Sung Ho led the human team in this competition. He approached it differently than the Vornte commander approached it. The Vornte commander was direct and aggressive, always looking for quick victories and immediate success. Sung Ho was patient and strategic. He made moves that seemed strange at first, moves that gave up territory and resources in the short term, but created massive advantages in the long term. By the time the competition ended, the human team had won decisively. The Vornte warrior had been defeated by a strategy that he had not anticipated and could not counter. The reaction in the watching galaxy was immediate. Suddenly, humans did not seem so weak or inferior. Suddenly, humans seemed to have abilities and skills that were different from the Vornte, but equally valuable. The third competition was a weapons test, where competitors had to create and use weapons efficiently to hit targets and solve problems. Han Buell won this competition for the humans. She designed a weapon system that was more effective than the standard Vornte weapons. She showed creative thinking and practical engineering skill that impressed the judges and the watching audience. By the 5th competition, the humans had won 4 out of 5 events. The final competition was the most complex one. It involved resource management, deception, diplomacy, and combat all mixed together. It was designed to test every aspect of a warrior or leader. The humans and Vornte faced off in this final test, and the humans won again. When all the competitions were finished, The results were clear. Humans and Vorntai were different, but not inferior or superior. They were equally capable warriors, just in different ways. The Vorntai were physically stronger and more direct. Humans were more creative, more adaptable, and better at thinking in unexpected ways. Both species had value. Both species had strength. Scholar Nuriseth watched the final competition from the observation stands alongside Dr. He Wan. As they watched Sung Ho execute a brilliant tactical maneuver that caught the Vorntai judges by surprise, Nuriseth turned to her human colleague with a new understanding in her golden eyes. "You were designed by survival itself," Nuriseth said. "Your species evolved through millions of years of real competition against impossible odds. We Vorntai were designed in laboratories by minds that could still be wrong. Your DNA was refined by nature, which is more intelligent than any designer. Perhaps we have not been surpassed. Perhaps we have simply been reminded that there are many ways to be strong." The competitions changed how the galaxy saw both humanity and the Vorntai. The results were distributed across every channel, watched by billions of beings. Humans were no longer seen as a weak young species. They were seen as dangerous equals. The Quarantine Coalition lost support from some of its members. The question was no longer whether humans should be contained. The question was how humans and other species could coexist and share power in a galaxy that was larger and more complicated than anyone had previously understood.